Started now, so you can click the got it button. We are recording this, so please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking so we can avoid background noise. There's some building work. I have come to the office today, although working still primarily from home, so I hope it's not too much distracting noise for you when I'm sharing. And if possible, in the participants list, have your full name, and if you can squeeze in the name of your organization. You can change this by going down in your buttons, clicking on participants so it appears, and then if you roll over your name, the more button appears that lets you rename how you appear in the list, so we can all know where you're coming from. There's the live transcript activated for all the sessions of the conference, so you can click on the button live transcript of Zoom to customize if you want it to appear, if you want the full on the right, or if you don't want it at all. And please, if you have a question or a comment, raise your electronic hand. It's part of the reactions button. And you can also type in the chat. You can raise your physical hand, but because there are quite a few of us, it's more than 55 participants, we're 56 today, and I have a limit to how many windows I can scroll through. It might be, Martin might give me a hand if you have raised your hand and I have missed you, but please use your electronic one because it might be a little bit easier. So I think we can get rid of this slide now. Martin, if you can, that's really great. And I wanted to start with our first team from Poland, who are going to present about treasure houses of Polish academic heritage. They were trying to put a catalog together of all the museums, and that proved really challenging. So they're going to discuss about this. And we have Marta Piszczatowska from the Museum of History of Medicine and Pharmacy of the Medical University of Bialystok, and Marek Bukowski. I probably murdered the way I pronounce your names. The Museum of the Medical University of Gdańsk. So on to Marta first. It would be great if you can keep it to the 10 minutes we said, so we have time for discussion afterwards. And you're welcome to share your screen if you want.
Yes. Okay. Share. Yeah.
And we can see this fine. So on to you, Marta.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure to be there, and I would like to present our topic. The Association of University Museum in Poland has started in 2014 as a non-governmental organization. Today, the museums and collection, yes.
Marta, you might want to put this in presenter mode, maybe the slides. That's perfect.
Oh, yes. And today, museum and collection from 23 cities and 61 universities work with the association. We started with 12 museums, and by the end of 2020, we have 106 museum and collection. In 2016, we published the first English catalog, which was connected with UMAC conference in Milan. It included only 26 museums. 1 year later, the Association of University Museum published University Museum Catalog, the first large publication in Poland to present academic heritage. Each of the 50 museums present 10 objects. The catalog was co-financed by the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. In 2020, we started the English version of this catalog, and now the next part will be presented by the Vice President of our association, Dr. Marek Bukowski, from Museum of the Medical University of Gdańsk, and by our President of the association, Professor Hubert Kowalski from University of Warsaw Museum. So Marek, you are?
Yes, I'm here. Hello to everybody, and welcome our third very important co-author, Hubert Kowalski from Warsaw. We presented in 2016 in Milan. Perhaps you remember our catalog. It was really smart and small. It was users friendly, and it was very easy to be kept in our baggage during the journey. The new one is bigger, it's more than 3 kilo heavy, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that we are in a very specific situation. We were forced, as majority of you, to shift a lot of our activity to the internet, to virtual reality, to be in touch with our audience, to students, researchers. And we realized suddenly that we need something that will be somehow the catalog, but also the guide for these people to have a travel in our university museums. And we start to discuss the problem. Of course, the first problem was the media, the technology problem, how to start the conference via internet. So the Zoom, the Google Meets and other were very useful. The next one was to prepare the standards for present publication, the photo standards, the text standard. And we find out that we had some problems because, for example, the photographer have to travel around Poland to be in touch with each single museum, and it was not very easy because, as you know, the personal problems and the COVID problems made this straight contact more complicated. Then Marta were forced to collect this together and to prepare the whole publication. But from the other hand, we also realized that thanks to pandemic, I'm very sad to say thanks, we are able to focus on publication. We are able to devote more time and more effort to make it as good as possible, because we haven't got visitors in our museums, we haven't got classes, we haven't got all kind of this normal, usual activities in the museums. Additionally, we were informed by our university society that the catalog, the publication, the preparing of this suddenly also collect the attention of university society at our university museums. And I think it was somehow the challenge, but also the opportunity to not only to work together, but also to establish some kind of standard of future cooperation. And I think Hubert will tell more about it because he's the head, he's a president. So he is the man who was responsible to be in touch with each of our university. Hubert.
Hi, Marta, can you put the next one? As you can imagine, normally in the normal times, not during the COVID, it's a real challenge to cooperate with 106 individuals. But in COVID, it was partially even harder than usual. The slide you can see is like more than 3 tons because the book weighs, as Marek said, 3.5 kilos almost. Next one, please. On one hand, during the COVID time, when the hotels were closed, and the restaurants were closed, it was hard to even drive from one city to another one. But on the other hand, it turned out that when you've got no people around, then you got nicer pictures, and then you can prepare objects easily because people, they don't do guides, tours, etc. So it was even a quicker situation concerning creating a book than before COVID. Next one, please. Now you can see what it looks like inside. Of course, the book is, we've got it in a hardcover. We publish it like that, but you can download it from our site. You got short information about each of the collections of the museums. Then you've got 10 most important objects from the collection. Next one, please. Which is very important. We send photographers through the whole country, and we did the professional pictures of the objects. Next one, please. Like this plaster cast, for example, from our collection from University of Warsaw Museum. Next one. We made pictures of interiors of our museums. Next one, please. And we made many pictures. We took pictures from of our buildings, of our aerial views of the campuses. Next one, please. And also the details of our buildings of the universities. Next one. As you can see, many aerial views. Next one, please. This is, for example, Gdańsk and the Warsaw. Next one. Poznań. Next one. And look, that was our technology university. What I would like to say for the end, I think that after the COVID, we are, as individuals, as an association, we are much stronger than before. This work on this catalog were really it wasn't very easy, but now we've got not only the book, not only the catalog, we've got a huge database of pictures of the objects, of the buildings, of the campuses, which I'm sure will give us a chance to produce another exhibitions, etc. So I want to line it strongly that I can really say that we are much stronger as an association after the COVID, after this year, which we have behind us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the whole team. This is great. And thank you for keeping to time. Let me do my electronic clapping as well, so you have lots in your window. I can see you have quite a lot of people wanting to order the book, so make sure you put up. We have a little bit of time now for questions or comments to the colleagues from Poland. Is there anybody who would like to ask something?
First of all, I would like to thanks to Andrew for such a nice comment. Of course, it will be with great pleasure, and we'll be very proud if our book will be in every university library. We published the link to download the PDF version. I think it is much more useful for the users than this very heavy copy. The owners of this said that's great, but it's like being at the fitness at the gym because it's so heavy. So if you are trying to be fit, just use our catalog. Yeah, Natalie and others are talking about the materiality of the book and how it's important to have the real thing that COVID showed us, but it's really also important that you have held open access with this, and people can freely download the digital copy, students and colleagues and researchers, so that this is really useful. I was wondering if there are other people in the audience who were also joined in a similar way with a common endeavor, with deadlines, with a specific deliverable that you had to overcome, even if it wasn't the catalog, the way our presenters talked about, that you might want to share in the chat or to raise your hand. You can all see the comments there. Sarah Berry Hayes is also saying that having the database of photographs is also really useful for publicity and also from a marketing perspective, not just the research and teaching. So it's a really great project. And there are more people so Sarah Estrada from Montreal, that really want to have the printed copy. So I think, do you have on your website the information if people do want to order and get hold of this?
No, but you can send us an email and we'll send you a hard copy.
Okay. Okay.
For all of us, okay? It's not a problem. And there was a question, what was the biggest challenge, assembling the information from the people. That was the problem. And then the translations, yes, that was the problem, because you can imagine that during the COVID, when you may send an email and then you will have an answer in 3 or 4 weeks sometimes. So that was a real problem.
Yes.
Additionally to mention by Hubert, as you know, there are some people who answer the emails in 20 minutes. There are someone who answer in 2 hours, and there is a group in 2 days, and also there are people in 2 weeks. So it, I think that if we ask Marta, was she frustrated and tired preparing and collected information? She, as you see, she starts smiling because it was a very exhausting time for her. She was working hard to collect this information, to be in touch with people, also Hubert. And it was really, we are astonished that the personal, the human reason were so important and so stressful for us in this project.
Some people are asking, did you have the photographs already in existence when you started the project, or did you have to also take new photographs apart from sourcing the text?
Well, I think like 5 or maybe 7% was already in existence, but mainly we did new pictures. We took new pictures.
Okay, and Sian was asking, how long did it take to collate the entire book? Like, to put it all together, how long did it take you?
Well, I think that we started in March.
Yes.
And it lasted, I mean, the whole process lasted for 7-8 months until December.
Okay, that's great, thank you. So other people, while we're moving to the second team of speakers, if you have some experience in the sector of something similar, do please share as well in the chat to keep the conversation going. But in the interest of time, so we don't take away from the other speakers, I wanted to ask you all to join me in thanking the Polish team and all the colleagues, Hubert, Marta, and Marek, and all your other colleagues who contributed, who are not here with us today. So thank you very much. And we are going to move to South Africa. Sian Tiley-Nel from the University of Pretoria Museums is going to be talking about the social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic of the higher education sector and the closing of university museums in South Africa. So Sian is going to try and share her screen now. On to you, Sian.
Thank you very much.
That's great, it started sharing. If you can put it in presenter mode, then we can get started. That's it, perfect.
Can everyone see it? There you are.
Yes, it's all fine.
Thank you, thank you. I'd like to thank all the organizers for allowing us. There are only 3 presenters from the whole of South Africa, and even less from the African continent. And this all began as networking when I met Marta in Japan at the ICOM conference in 2019. My topic is largely not about social networking or networking as such, but the social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on higher education sector and the closing of university museums in South Africa. University museums, by their very definition, are in the service of society. Globally, all universities in higher education are embedded within that society. They aim to provide quality education to contribute mostly in the form of research, teaching, and training. Yet, like all university museums, they continue to be unrecognized for their social value, their networking impact, and that they make on society, both to the wider community and on an individual level. The problem in general, and this is my point of view, is that myopic academia is at most times obsessed with research and rankings. whereas social aspects and access to heritage, which is a fundamental human right, and museums are relegated within the higher education sector as just an added value. This paper examines how the COVID-19 pandemic has fundamentally changed our social role of universities, and particularly universities within a museum South African perspective. The fact that there are very little people actually attending this conference from the continent says it all. Several challenges will be identified within the higher education sector and how these have changed with the social in mind. 5 changes are highlighted just as examples for university museums, whether they are opened or closed, to make a social turn now in this 21st century and not the next. The pandemic has adversely affected the world. I'm sorry, it's not moving on to the next slide. I'm sure it will. The pandemic has adversely affected the world, from economic collapse, poverty, unemployment, dormant tourism, to exasperated global levels of social change. However, university museums have survived many plagues, many pandemics, and come through several world wars, natural disasters, and particularly in South Africa, very heavy political upheavals, and we've faced many economic downturns. The current pandemic has opened Pandora's box and let free one of the largest historical disruptions to higher education, and in turn has left no university museum unaffected, to the point of closure. The metaphor of Pandora's box is used in a modern sense, in the sense that while the box has unleashed terror and death, the pandemic, illness and sorrow, it has also released new challenges, opportunities, resilience, positivity, and change. This perspective and theoretical turn towards the university museums making a social impact is greater than ever before. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing why my slide is not moving on.
You want to press enter on your keyboard? Maybe
I have.
All right, and it doesn't do anything.
No.
And
I'll carry on for the
worry.
sake of time.
Yeah.
Both the good and bad ramifications of higher education have reshaped our education's social impact. There is a need to rebalance and bring about a radical or an incremental change within university museums. Institutional museums in South Africa have had to recenter the intellectual, creative, digital, accessible, and inclusive approach towards the social, but somehow continue resiliently remain even when museum doors are permanently closed or closed for long periods of time. It all depends on resources. For example, in this case, UMAC-SA was developed in 2020 amid the pandemic crisis by the University of Pretoria Museums. We currently have a network of only 76 people, but very few universities are wishing to join ICOM, perhaps due to lack of resources or lack of institutional support. But being positive, UMAC-SA has made a single step for South African universities to honestly and collectively face the many risks and threats to university collections and archives. And a very good example of that is the great loss of the University of Cape Town's library, which is a major loss for the African continent. It was lost in a fire. Sadly, there remains very little solidarity or commitment from higher education to universities and museums. However, a handful are taking on this accountability. The University of Pretoria, the University of UKZN, which is actually attending this course. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, let's put it that way. But we hope by embracing ICOM and UMAC ethics, we can perhaps begin foregrounding an African UMAC. This would be an ideal vehicle to give social impetus, even if this just is an ambition a decade from now. Honestly, the University of Pretoria Museums were not, like many, prepared for the pandemic, and we were caught unaware of the reality and its ongoing effect. South Africa only has 28 universities. Not all have museums and collections, but they were not synchronized. Many remain open while others are closed, and each university selected a different model. Although governed by government's legislation and there's a direction of lockdowns and levels, some universities closed for a year, others still are closed. But for example, university museums closed for 10 months, we reopened, we closed again, and we reopened yesterday for the first time again. So we are reacting to this pendulum-like swing of pandemic access, waiting in anticipation to see how the university community and how civic society will respond to the university museums in a crisis mode. This has been successful because when we have opened, we've received a large number of visitors, and as we've pivoted towards the digital. The 5 challenges to higher education, and I'm sorry it's not on the slides, it's not working, but the changes are summarized. I decided to borrow from the insights that I attended on a workshop on social sustainability held at the university in Pretoria in February 2021. So from a higher education perspective, one of the first challenges is that university visions of academic excellence have turned towards social responsibility. Another challenge is that they've questioned the purpose of education, shifting from the traditional privileged to a more inclusive approach. A third challenge identified was that research focused has moved from citation and local impact to global impact, greater international cooperation for their future sustainability and financial sustainability on the global continent. And the last challenge that was identified is that universities are not just knowledge centers, but question how they serve society better now and for the future. Likewise, university museums are at a social turning point, and that social impact is augmented by a response to the pandemic. This paper proposes that a university museum can change in the following ways. And of course, this is coming from our perspective. So for example, it was critical for the University of Pretoria to launch UMAC-SA, more than just become a member amid the crisis. The reason for this was to become more globally connected, to make more networks, but also to be less isolated on an already historically isolated continent. Membership to UMAC on the continent remains very low. And the reasons for this is largely due to the affordability of ICOM fees. I don't know if you know, but the ICOM institutional membership fees are perhaps an entire salary of some of the staff members, and a lack of general resources, and in many cases, lack of institutional support. One of the other changes is that the pandemic has accelerated our societal expectations of university museums, turning away from a focus on collections towards our global connections. That's not to say we're ignoring our collections, but also to connect on key shared issues such as decolonization, the return of collections to Africa, and restitution. This social turn for us has made the university museums pay much more critical attention to equity, inclusion, digital transformation as much as our resources will allow, and to pivot towards the contextual realities that the social, economic, and political impact within South Africa directly affects the university museums. The museums have also gained greater empathy, creative resilience, and developed digital competency. And we have also widened our cultural understanding. But one thing that is missing is that there is a dire need to bridge the North and Global South within university museums. And to me, that's a very glaring gap. Pandora's box, in conclusion, within an academic context, is not all doom and gloom. There's always a silver lining. And as Churchill said, one must never let a good crisis go to waste. The reputational value and impact of university museums should never be underestimated. They do serve as a strategic art, cultural, and heritage ambassadors for higher education. And they are key national repositories that curate, conserve, and research collections on behalf of the nation. Our university museums in South Africa, for example, are in a better state than some of our national museums. Therefore, university museums are an integral part of higher education's social responsibility. They are duly institutions that are created to serve civic society as a whole. After all, the meaning of university is universe or whole. There are now many ways of looking at co-working, global cooperation, transdisciplinarity, and a redirected strategic focus towards the social. I like to call it the university museumscape. And we will always serve as institutional places of memory of both past and present. But the university museums need to start reimagining themselves and looking at future focused and be future focused. In conclusion, the moral of the Pandora's pandemic box is to never leave our curiosity unchecked, to retain the expectations that university museums, like higher education, will always be resilient, but they must be willing to change and be changed, often by forces beyond our control. And I think we need to leave that Pandora's box open and see how university museums progress in the next 20 years on the African continent. Thank you very much. I apologize about the slide.
Don't worry, Sian. Thank you so much. This was really, really thought-provoking. Thank you. Let's do both digital and physical. Thank you so much also because the talk ties in very well with a lot of the theme of the keynote and a lot of other things coming at the conference about the role of university museums post the pandemic and this increasing social responsibility and demand for them to take that seriously and have really measurable, specific things that they do to change in that direction. So thank you so much for bringing the perspective from South Africa. I saw there was a comment from your colleague also about how there's surging numbers of visitors coming back to the museums in person after the digital fatigue. So while people are putting comments and questions in the chat for Sian, maybe I wanted to ask very quickly if you can tell us a little bit more of what are you seeing about the profile of the visitors and their interest now that you're gradually and very slowly opening up again?
Well, we're opening and closing, so we constantly feel like this pendulum swinging. But we were very surprised because we know that tourism is almost non-existent in South Africa. So we were expecting our first visitor to be a foreigner or a domestic tourist, but in fact it was students. Within the past 6 months, we've received over 9,000 visitors. This is a record for small university museums. So our immediate community were the ones coming to the museums because they had this dire need, probably. We're also the largest residential university in South Africa. So I think these students needed to get out from behind their desks or their Zoom and come and enjoy their spaces. And that is what the museums are doing, is we are promoting our museums as social, creative, mindful spaces. Even if you just come there to use the Wi-Fi, they're coming to the museums. So definitely the visitor is inward looking, and we have within the past few months received a lot of domestic tourists, but we have here and there started, the international tourists are trickling in. But at this stage, it's largely the university community as our first visitors.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I don't know, are there other people who are finding similar situation from the participants in their own museums to what Sian was describing that they might want to comment on? You're getting a lot of love in the chat, as you can see. Everybody really liked how you brought us the perspective from South Africa. There were also some tricky questions there about the accessibility and how being part of UMAC how for some of the staff and universities in South Africa, this is really challenging. So, and I know that the whole UMAC community is really trying hard for accessibility. So it's something maybe to consider and think about that. Was there anybody who had a question or comment for Sian? Either put it in the chat or raise your digital hand. I saw that you are chairing the next session on teaching, so it will be really interesting to find out a little bit more. I was wondering when you were talking about the students coming back to visit and how you're also trying the digital transformation with all its challenges. whether you think some elements of co-creation and asking them to help you in this process together with the staff might work out, or if you've already tried something in this direction.
Yes, we have. The university has remained closed on lockdown level 3. So we are still by appointment. There's no free access. We pivoted to online teaching, offering online presentations. That was very successful, as well as all the schools within our immediate community, desperately, because they use our collections as part of the higher education curricula. They all gladly moved these, instead of physical visitors, to online presentations that you heard her yesterday, Nicole Hoffman presents. But we also largely relied on our global community. And we couldn't afford the move to digitization. So we approached the Google Arts and Culture platform, and we launched that last month. We're on the Google Arts and Culture platform and have so far 5 online exhibitions and 700 items from our collections online. And that cost us nothing. The Google Arts and Culture platform has only just started in South Africa. And that was something very useful because we couldn't afford a lot of the digital resources. So not that we were looking for freebies, but we were trying to connect with more global platforms to reach wider audiences beyond just South Africa. And I see that they've also introduced a lot of new people within the continent. And I think only in 2022, they're launching the Africa Google Arts and Culture platform next year. And that would be an immense, that would make an immense difference for many third world countries who don't have those resources.
Yeah. And we have one last question, comment before we move to the next speaker. Sarah Berry Hay said something that I was thinking myself. You were very honest and astute in mentioning the lack of implicit value that museums sometimes hold within the higher education institutions. But she was wondering, the kind of being nice to have, but she was wondering if this is a universal issue, not just the South African one, which is a tricky one. I don't know if you wanted to address it, but maybe, yeah.
I could just mention, yes, it is a universal issue. It took us 20 years to get our institution to notice us. And at the onset of the pandemic, the university museums moved directly under a very supportive executive. Our biggest supporter is our vice chancellor, but it took us 20 years to get to that point. And I know it's a universal issue. And I had discussions with Andrew Simpson and many other colleagues across the world that not all institutions are supportive of their museums. And fortunately ours only recently are. And they've begun to realize that our museums are institutional assets. And this is beyond the research, teaching, and academic program. It's more about our impact on society and the broader community. But it took us 20 years to get there.
Some really important issues for us, I think, to keep going in the conversations in the other sessions as well. Thank you very much, Sian. So I wanted to ask you to join me in thanking Sian before we move on to Japan and Tokyo. Thank you so much again. Okay, our next speaker is Yurika Sato from the Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology. She's going to use a video presentation talking about closing status and the community formation of university museums due to COVID-19 in Japan. So Yurika, it's on to you. If you want to share your screen for your video.
Thank you, and nice to meet you all. My name is Yurika Sato. I'm working at the Nature and Science Museum of Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology. So today I would like to talk about case study in Japan about the museum networks. Today's presentation will be made by videos. Just wait, please. so moving. It's not moving this net. Just wait. Sorry, just wait. そうだ。通信が動かなかったね。
Yurika, you're going to try to play from the slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. Okay, sorry, and just direct talking, and so okay, so let's start. So, and nice to meet you all. And my name is Yurika Sato, and I'm working at the Nature Science and Museum at Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology. And I am very happy to be here to talk about the university network with you. So I'd like to thank all at UMAC, as you have helped us to maintain the museum with a lot of advice during this pandemic. So I used to specialize in insect ecology, but now I'm working on the history of cell culture technology. This is an silkworm. The title of today's report is University Museum Closures and Community Building, the Impact of COVID-19 in Japan. So, and today's overview, temporary close of Japanese University Museum during the Corona disaster, and second, organization of Zoom meetings for information sharing, and three, Corona response at the Nature and Science Museum, Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology. The fourth is a discussion. So first, let's look at the changes in the temporary closure of Japanese University Museum during the Corona disaster. I have been keeping the monthly records of temporary closures of Japanese university museums. And blue indicated that the museum is open, and red indicated that is temporarily closed, and light blue indicated that is open by appointment, and green indicated that is open and campus only, and yellow indicated that is open only to people in the surrounding area. The university museum is repeatedly opened and closed whenever a state of emergency is decreased, and the situation faculties and is not stable. So it's closing and opened and closing and opened and closing and opened, and now it's a closing. So the map shows the chronological order to opening and closing the museum. Here's the regions of Hokkaido, Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyushu. My universities are located in Tokyo. It seems that it's difficult to enter library for the general public unless you change your rank in the regular classes. And this site is Hokkaido and Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto and Kyushu, Okinawa, and my university is here. so, and next is August, next is November, next is January, next is April, next is April late, next is May, next is August. It's now, so it's a so bad situation. It's many of red point. So challenge is opening and closing university museums. University museums are more susceptible to opening and closing than other museums. So what's the challenge of contact between students on campus and outside? How does this related restrictions of campus activities? So how to coordinate with curatorial course and training, how to coordinate with the open campus, and how to maintain contact with all museum volunteers. So isolation of museum staff and lack of information. So we organized a meeting via Zoom. We invited like-minded people from university museums to exchange information. The first university museum information sharing meeting, and so afterwards we will request the university museum mailing list and the use of it as an information sharing community for each museum. So second, university museum information sharing meeting. Meeting theme is what to do about opening, closing, and student training. So the museum section of the university is a bit small. On the other hand, we know on the campus, we have the exact opportunity challenge of bringing in people from outside. I can only imagine the stress on those in change how to manage the museum during the emergency situation at the university. So and I'll create an email mailing list, share information on university museum, something people can't meet at the right time. With email, we can share ideas and discuss without worrying about timing. So we would like to connect people related to university museum who are students from each other. So Zoom is nice, but we are so busy. Mailing list can continue to consult our members. So benefit for the community. I believe that the establishment of this communication, I was able to determine that given our location in Tokyo, a short-term recovery would be difficult. So our strategy was wait for the storm to pass while the went digital. Here we would like to share with you what we have done at the museum. So our museum was closed, but we put a lot of effort into the organization and presenting that material. Digital exhibition of ukiyo-e and web publishing of special exhibitions, creation of the recognized silk mail using 3D virtual SNS. We challenged the communication in the imaginary exhibition space. So reconstruction, spinning mail, interpretive tour, and virtual space. It is also virtual space, and the silk mail on a real tape. In the virtual exhibition space, emotional buttons and the user the express reactions. So it's also virtual size. And hardest part this time will be for the new student. The Welcome to Campus program includes display of commentary from senior students. And we did our best to make the new student feel welcome. The new student needed to visit the museum and get a real feel for the university. So now, to a surge in the post-Olympic infections, the curatorial process course has, we have no choice but to support online. So online events are essential for the museum staff of the future. This is a program designed to train people to be able to make use real objects and digital objects. This is what program is all about. So this video is so from the Botanical Gardens backyard talk broadcast. So she said about humidity control in large greenhouse. And it's so top side and dancing that wall say. And they are our students. So training online commentary planning exercise by students about history and mechanism and SDGs talk and with a Japanese style spinning machine. This is many and many textile machine. He talked and the first introduction.
ガラボウ機の紹介は今回歴史、気候、メンテナンス、未来の4つのパートに分かれており、それぞれ担当の班が工夫を凝らした紹介をしてくれますので、楽しみにしていてください。でですね。
So it's a summary. An issue is corona pandemic is more likely to be closed than a normal museum. And the university museum staff do not have the same opportunities to share information. The potential of university museums, online system are being development, and either for university museum to make online requests to each other. And university museums have an advantage in online collaboration. So, and our students needed to build community and linkage in the university museum. How can reform the mission of university museums, and how can we implement community links and student support? So we use to network the communities is a challenge for the future. So this is next challenge. It's new ideas. So finally, I have some news for you. So do you play video games? So we are planning to have an online talk event with universities connected to this mailing list networks. Have you ever heard of Animal Crossing, New Horizon on Nintendo Switch? It is a famous Japanese game. So using this game to create function, we will create kimono from material from two different universities and exchange them with each other. I would like to challenge this as a new communication tool because I think that the students who have the game can try it while enjoying online talk. So thank you very much. So I'm not familiar with English talk and may not be able to understand it well. So I may not be able to respond to your questions. If you have any questions, please feel and email to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yurika. Your English was great and it was very clear what you presented. So thank you really very much because you gave us some great ideas about how the university museums can connect with the community and also with your volunteers on Zoom. It was very interesting to see, as well as with the students and continuing this. And people really loved your idea at the end with the game. So do put in the chat. We need to cut it here in the interest of time, but Any questions or comments to Yurika, put it in the chat, and she also had her email there. Your last idea about the game gives me just enough time before a quick comfort break from this next session to announce that UMAC and Universeum boards are opening a competition for the best background ever. I'm not going to win it, I think. I haven't had time to be creative. It's my real background. So any of you, you still have time to work on your backgrounds. It's just a fun thing. If you don't want to use backgrounds, you don't have to, but they will announce the winners at the closing session of the conference. So you still have time to be creative. And I wanted all of you to join me in thanking all our speakers for 3 very different perspectives, which showed the importance of networking and working collaboratively during COVID. Thank you, everyone, and all of you who attended very much. That's all from me. We're going to close this session now. Martin, do we have about a minute or 2 before the next one?
Yeah, I think we should make 1 or 2 minutes short break. But we let it open here. You can just stay here. If you want to go to session number 4, New Ways of Teaching. If you want to go to New Ways of Teaching 2, the other one, parallel session, you would have to leave now and click on the link in the program for the other session.
But you have just go for a quick comfort break now. You have time if you wanted to stay here.
Yes. And I think Sian, do I say that correctly? Sian? I'm sorry. Sian, okay.
Cyan.
Sian.
Cyan, like the color, cyan.
Ah, okay. Sorry, thank you. It's okay to wait 2 or 3 minutes to start?
Yes, I'd like a quick break in.
Okay, then take your
Thanks.
time. You're the chair. We can't start without you anyway.
No, I'll start. Just I need a quick pee break.
Please.
Or maybe you can stop the recording, Martin, for now and start it again.